We need leadership, leadership, leadership at the governor's seat. And again, this is what I bring into to this race: outside leadership, military as well as corporate. And it's very simple. It's about accountability, responsibility. And yes, we're going to raise standards. Yes, we're going to bring in school choice for parents. 70% of Minnesotans want school choice. We're going to raise standards, but we're also going to bring back discipline. The priorities that Minnesotans have today, the top three, is the economy, it's crime, and they want a decent education for their kids. They're not getting it. And I'll give the Democrats an early warning what's going to happen, because they have nothing to run on. They ruin their state. They're going to demonize me as too radical, too conservative, too religious. They're going to Brett Kavanaugh me, and they're going to Clarence Thomas me, because they have nothing to run on. They want to distract from the disaster they've made of this state.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Michele Tafoya podcast. Please hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you with us every single time. Wherever you download your podcast, just hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode like this one with Kendall Qualls. He is a conservative running for governor in Minnesota. Now, some people think Minnesota is ripe for the taking for Republicans. Others say not so fast. It's going to take exactly the right candidate. So I have taken it as sort of a mission here to interview all the Republican candidates running. I'd love to interview Tim Walz as well, but so far he has not responded positively to any invitations. So we'll keep working on that. But Kendall Qualls ran for governor, ran in the primary, or ran for the endorsement 4 years ago, did not get the party's endorsement. And so Scott Jensen was the candidate running against Tim Walz 4 years ago. Well, now Tim Walz has decided to run for a third term, and there are a number of people throwing their hat in the ring to try to replace him. Kendall Qualls is one of them. Conservative candidate, Army veteran, business leader. He runs an organization called Take Charge Minnesota, which is an organization that tries to empower Black families to find their strength and live the American dream, really. So we're going to interview Kendall. We're going to push some issues with him about education, abortion, crime, and the economy. Kendall Qualls is next. Kendall Qualls, gubernatorial candidate in Minnesota to run against Tim Walz, who is looking for a third term. Doesn't seem to be getting any pushback in his own party, but there are a number of Republicans, Kendall, you among them, who want to try and send this man packing, and it can't come soon enough, in my humble opinion. How confident are you that Minnesota, which many people think cannot turn red, can turn red?
Well, it can actually turn red. And the reason is we just haven't had the right candidate. And you know what? There are enough people in Minnesota that really resonate with my from poverty to prosperity story. And I want to make sure that that door remains open. That door of prosperity remains open for the rest of Minnesotans and for generations. You know, Michele, this is less to do about Tim Walz and more to do about saving this state for the rest of Minnesota and for generations of Minnesotans that have been under the yoke of Tim Walz and the Democratic Party for nearly 20 years. And it's time for a change. We just need to put forth the right candidate in the Republican Party to make that happen. And I'm that candidate to do that.
Well, you sent me a clip from Steve Deese's podcast the other day, and he was asked about Minnesota and said you need a likable candidate and one with the right messages. Policy is going to matter too. And full disclosure, as I said in the intro, you and I worked together on your last candidacy. And it's so frustrating because there are very small groups of people on the Republican side of Minnesota who demand that you talk about abortion in a very almost militant fashion. There are a lot of middle of the road people in Minnesota who don't want to hear that. How are you going to address that?
Well, in the last election, when we lost everything, there was a huge reflection in the base of the Republican Party saying, you know what, we had the wrong guy at the top of the ticket to represent us. Because my message, again, that resonates beyond the Republican Party to swing voters, to moderate Democrats. Here's a guy that started with nothing, made the American dream through the private sector, free enterprise market system, that understood that getting a good education, and abiding by the rules, working hard, having accountability, that those things really still work. And there's rarely have we had someone about my life experience, but also that can speak to a broader base beyond our party. They understand that, you know what, we need to focus on getting the right candidate first. So I've been involved with the base of the Republican Party ever since, for the last 4 years. And we're going to get it. So that minority, that loud voice of the minority in the Republican Party has been overshadowed by the practical components of those delegates. And we're going to win this endorsement. In fact, we're going to focus on those things that matter to people, just like President Trump did: economy first, getting the crime under control, and then lastly, making our public schools to be proud again across our nation.
Let's focus in on the economy. What can you tell people your plan is?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, we're one of the highest tax states in the nation as it relates.
I think we're fourth highest.
That's right. For both personal and corporate business tax. Our business tax is number one in the nation. We surpassed New Jersey. So look, at the end of the day, if we want to make sure that everyone prospers, we have to lower taxes so we're not hindering people from getting by in this state, and we're not hindering investment in our state from a business standpoint.
And the other side will say, oh, you're helping your business cronies, and it's only going to be corporate taxes that you cut. And what programs are you going to cut in order to make these taxes happen? And you will say?
I will say you've had 8 years to do this, to win your story, and you've made Minnesota much harder to live in, much harder to get by, much harder to raise a family, much harder to get a decent education. And businesses have been fleeing, and people have been fleeing, not only to Florida, Texas, and Tennessee, they've been fleeing to neighboring states, South Dakota and Iowa and Wisconsin. So you had your chance. It's time to move over, stop the whining and complaining, and let the adults take over.
And you may have seen that Tim Walz recently said that all of the people running on the Republican side are Trump wannabes. How do you respond to rhetoric like that?
Well, I don't, because Tim Walz, he is not a statesman. He's not a leader. He's the biggest whiner that we have in the country. Look, at the end of the day, the American people voted for President Trump in the White House. For him to use words like he's a tyrant, he's a Hitler, he's a fascist. That's not how elected leaders are supposed to talk when the majority of Americans voted him in. He should be better than that, and he knows better. He's rallying up a very fragile, mentally ill base that doesn't understand how our system works. The other part of this is people are sick of the division in our own state. They want some type of unity and a plan and a vision to take us forward. And that's why we need someone, Michelle. That's why we need someone from outside politics that will give someone with an R behind their name on the ballot a second look, a second chance. Not a knee-jerk reaction, that they would have someone from the legislature that we've been doing for the last 20 years.
Crime was your second point, and I think everyone in Minnesota, maybe with the exception of the Minneapolis City Council, would agree with you that crime is really been detrimental in this state. We've all experienced some level of it. And what do you say to people who say, well, that just comes along with big cities? Like, why does that have to be something that we normalize?
Well, first of all, we don't normalize it. In fact, because it was never normal to begin with in our state. Look, Minneapolis was rated the #1 city for safety and quality of life by Forbes magazine in October 2009. That's the normative for us as a state. So we don't need to accept this new normal. And we won't, actually, with the new leadership. Listen, we can't be a great state without a great Minneapolis. We won't be on the list for conventions, for sports programs, for conventions, and from that perspective. But you think about any type of tournaments and all those type of things. People look for safe cities to have their programs, and we're suffering on that list of convention sites. Michelle, I was in downtown Minneapolis yesterday. I was at the iconic IDS Towers. There used to be over 50,000 people going into that building any given day. I was there doing a selfie video, and there was sparse sparse traffic in and out of the city, and even downtown in the streets. But there is a private small business jeweler that's been there for over 25 years. It basically said they have one or two customers coming in when they used to have a thriving business. They can't stay open much longer.
It's with restaurants. I was down there recently for a concert with my son, and it felt like you had to beeline for the auditorium, and then you had to beeline back to your parking. And it didn't feel like that when I first moved here 30 years ago. It did not feel like that. It felt clean. It felt safe. It felt beautiful. And downtown now, I've seen boarded up restaurants. With the Minneapolis City Council and the notion that we may have this Omar Fateh or Fatah, I don't know how he says his last name. I apologize because I've heard it both ways. Could win, lost his endorsement from the DFL. So we have Jacob Fry, who has, I guess, the endorsement and the returning mayor, but I don't love the job he has done either. When you have big cities with city councils and mayors who have such counterpoints of view to yours, how do you handle that? How do you deal with them?
Well, that's just fun. This is why we need to win the office of the governor, is because the only way that can take place, the only way we can make changes is going to have to be through the office of the governor. You know, when your choice is either Omar communist or / socialist or Mayor Fry communist or socialist light, that's not much of an option. Mm-hmm. We need a grown up in the office of the governor. And what we can do, and why I say that, is no good man or woman that wants to go in law enforcement will put their lives on the line for the city council of Minneapolis and St. Paul. There's no respect from the council to them, and they don't have respect going the other way either. But they do for me or at the state level. I've already been in conversations with many young people in their 20s, actually. I want to go in law enforcement. I'll work for you, but I'm not working for those guys. We'll hire 4 of the 500 law enforcement officers, and we'll deploy them into Twin Cities, whether the city council wants them there or not. It's the responsibility of the governor to ensure the safety of their citizens, regardless of where they reside.
Yeah, I am baffled by people who don't put public safety as high as you and I do on their list of priorities. I mean, it's to me, it's the number one job of any government, federal, local, whatever, is to protect citizens and keep them safe. Let's move on to education. This is a major concern. And we see it all over the state. There is an achievement gap that is insanely unacceptable. But also, we've got 50% of the kids in this state who cannot read at grade level, who cannot do math at grade level.
Yes.
How do we begin to tackle this problem?
Again, these are going back to the basics that we all remember, and it's not that hard to do. Again, we need leadership at the governor's seat. And again, this is what I bring into this race: outside leadership, military as well as corporate. And it's very simple. It's about accountability, responsibility. And yes, we're going to raise standards. Yes, we're going to bring in school choice for parents. 70% of Minnesotans want school choice. Mm-hmm. We're going to raise standards. But we're also going to bring back discipline. I'll tell you a brief story. There's a woman that and you know, my wife and I, we've opened a private Christian school. There are people that are that are teachers in schools today. They'll tell you the stuff that you'll never hear in our legacy media. There's an elementary school teacher that says that because of the discipline, the out of control discipline, even in elementary schools, that whenever there's a kid that acts out, she had to take the rest of the students into another classroom while this student was acting out, because they can't discipline them, they can't send them to the principal's office, and they can't expel them. Well, that child came into the classroom again, to a different classroom, and they had to move him again. And she said out of the 17 days that they have had school, they've only had 1 day of real education. It is completely out of control. And this is where, again, adult leadership plays in with accountability and responsibility from Governor Walz, that came from education. He should be disgraced.
I think it is a disgrace what's happened to education in Minnesota. It used to be such a point of pride in this state. We are seeing a number of people leave, as you mentioned. I've got friends who've moved to all of the places that you again, I get just back to this big picture. There's so much doubt that I'm not articulating this well. Forgive me, listeners. Forgive me for 1 second. Let me put this together.
Yeah.
There are a lot. So Tim Walz right now has a net zero approval rating. In other words, it's neutral. 47% approve, 47% disapprove. I don't know who the people who approve of him are, but are they willing now to say, you know what? It's not working. Maybe we do need to not be afraid of the big R next to a candidate's name and understand that our state's future is at stake. And so from all of you ran 4 years ago, you've had 4 years to reflect. What do you see that tells you this is the time? Some people think it's the time. Some people think it's never going to be the time.
Well, Michelle, this is a great question. Number one, it's the right time, but with the right candidate. Look, we as Republicans own what's happened to this state, even though we haven't been in charge. We have to put forth competitive candidates. Tim Walz embarrassed this state on the national stage. Guess what? We should own some of that. Okay? So I did not just spend 4 times reflecting. I spent the last 4 years building upon the momentum and the base that I had last time. I am the front runner in this campaign. Even though that KSTP poll shows something different, the Democrats would love for that poll to be accurate. They know that I'm the number one concern on the top of the ticket. I know that from inside sources. I know that from polling data that we have internally. Here's what I can tell you. We have to have the right candidate. And the reason is, despite all of the uber liberal stuff happening in our state, and despite all the things that he's done nationally to embarrass us, the Democrats still only have a 1-seat majority in the Senate, and we're tied in the House. If we get excitement at the top of the ticket, I believe with an outside candidate, with my background, that we can have excitement at the top of the ticket, a down ballot windfall, where we get the governor's seat, the Senate, and the House for the first time since 1969.
Oh,
that's when we can make some real changes in 2 years. People say that's a pipe dream. Hey, look, the American story is a pipe dream, and so is mine.
Yeah. 4 years ago when you ran, it ended up being Dr. Scott Jensen who got the endorsement, and that did not work out well. And he has thrown his hat back in the ring. So he's out there. He's going to try it again as well. The big issue that got him into trouble last time was when he was recorded saying we are going to ban abortion. And I only come back to this, Kendall, because I know there is a very strong swath of pro-life people in this state, and I know there is a very strong swath of pro-choice people in this state. This is an issue where people will use it as a fear tactic against Republicans. So how does the party avoid that? How do we message that so that we don't make that same error that Scott Jensen made last time? And I know he's gonna be asked. I'm gonna ask him about it again as well.
Sure. I'll let Scott answer his own answer. And mine was it's different. I have a different answer for that today, like I did last time. Hey, look, I lived my entire life, especially in the corporate world. You don't force down your views, your personal views, into an arena that really is not in that space, meant to be in that space anyway, from the corporate world. But today, realizing in Minnesota, 70% of Minnesotans want access to abortion. That includes Republican women as well. So understand that that's the reality of the landscape. Second is the priorities that Minnesotans have today. The top 3 is the economy, it's crime, and they want a decent education for their kids. They're not getting it. Abortion's not at the top. And when that comes up, here's my plan, and I'll give the Democrats an early warning what's going to happen. The reason they're going to bring that up because they have nothing to run on.
Yeah.
They ruin their state. They're going to demonize me as too radical, too conservative, too religious, they're going to Brett Kavanaugh me, and they're going to Clarence Thomas me, because they have nothing to run on. They want to distract from the disaster they've made of this state. And I won't let them distract it. I'll get back to the issues that most Minnesotans care about, those top 3 issues.
Before I let you go, it's important, I always felt, for people to talk to audiences of all kinds. I know for many years, Republicans, conservatives would not go to talk to Black audiences or minority audiences. They only went to friendly audiences. Whom are you speaking to? Whom are you planning to speak to? Whom are you willing to speak to?
I'm willing to speak to everyone. In fact, not willing, I have been. So, Michelle, you know my background, and you know what I lead is a nonprofit organization called Take Charge, and it's really meant to help Black Americans understand you can take charge of your life. You don't need permission from politicians. It is sad where we are today. My wife and I, Sheila, we've been invited not only to the Twin Cities in Minneapolis. In fact, we're invited this week. How do we rebuild Minneapolis Black community from the ground up? I'm not forcing my way there. I didn't ask to go there. I was invited there with other leaders as problem solvers. Keep in mind, I'm not in public office. People understand what leaders are, and they understand to invite leaders that actually have solutions that work. We've been invited around the country. How do we restore marriage into the Black community as the norm again? We've been invited to Memphis, to Detroit. We're going to Birmingham, Alabama. With no rank on our shoulder of public office, people understand leaders that tell the truth and understand how to get real solutions. And we're doing that today, even in the Hispanic community. I was on Hispanic podcast before I was on yours. And then, I didn't even have a translator. So we're getting to these communities with the American story that everyone wants, but the Democrats are not selling it. We are, and this is what people want more than anything. They want to improve the lives of themselves and their children.
All right. What's the website?
Website kq4mn.com. That's kq4mn.com.
All right. Go there. Check him out. You can look at his background, look deeper into the policy issues. Kendall, as you know, I'm going to be talking to all the candidates, and I appreciate your time so much, and we'll run into you again, I'm sure.
Thank you, Michelle.
I end every podcast saying, be brave, do good. I think anyone who runs for office is being brave and doing good, and that includes kq4mn.com. We'll see you next time. You can keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. It's an email that brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump.